In the dusty heat of dawn, when most of the world still dreams, Elias Turner stood on what most locals called the forsaken edge of the desert, a land so abandoned and silent that the wind seemed the only living thing brave enough to call it home. Elias was a single dad, a man whose life had often felt like a storm without shore. He had lost his wife 3 years earlier to an illness the doctors called sudden and unavoidable, and since that day, every sunrise had felt like a challenge, each sunset a mercy. His son, Micah, watched him from the truck's dusty window, eyes heavy with both curiosity and fear, for Micah was only 8 and spoke the language of hope more readily than the language of loss. 10 minutes ago, they had driven across Arizona's empty plains carrying only 2 suitcases, a faded family Bible, and enough courage to face whatever this new beginning might hold. The abandoned farm they had bought was advertised as a bargain, practically free, the agent had said, because it had no running water, no fenced pasture, and no promise of life. But to Elias, it looked like a chance to breathe again, a way to sow something pure in a world that too often left wounds unhealed and regrets unspoken. When Elias stepped from the truck, the air seemed too loud with silence, the kind that presses against your ears and demands attention. Mesquite thorns crunched underfoot as he walked toward the house, a crumbling structure with peeling paint that once must have been white, its shutters hanging like tired eyelids. The porch sagged but still clung to the stubborn hope of shelter, and a single rusty hinge creaked like an unanswered question as Elias opened the front door. Inside, time had carved its mark, a broken chair here, a faded quilt there, every object seemingly frozen in the last moment someone had abandoned it. It smelled of dust, wind and memory, the distinct scent of things left behind. Elias breathed it in with a strange mix of dread and expectation. Micah followed behind him, eyes wide. "Do you think anyone lives here, Dad?" he asked, his voice echoing off the empty walls. Elias hesitated, then smiled, not a full smile, the kind that reaches the eyes, but the kind that tries. "Only new stories," he said, "and we're going to write them." For the next days, Elias set to work like a man possessed by hope itself. He dug a well, repaired broken windows, stacked firewood against the outer wall, and started clearing brush so Micah could chase lizards and dream of wide-open skies. Neighbors from the nearest town, Red Mesa, looked at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. The ranch had been abandoned for years, ever since the original owners had vanished one summer without a trace. Rumors swirled among the locals, some said the land was cursed, others whispered about Apache spirits unsettled by trespassers. Elias didn't believe in curses, but sometimes, when the desert wind howled through the empty barn at night, he felt his own heart tighten in ways he couldn't explain. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and cast long shadows across the sand, Elias found himself staring at the faint outline of a trail leading into the scrub, footprints half buried in windblown dust, footprints that didn't belong to him or Micah. He called out, but only silence answered him. Still, something stirred in his heart, an ancient, restless pulse that made him feel uncomfortable and alive in the same moment. Over the next few days, Elias noticed little things, a scrap of cloth caught on a barbed wire fence, twigs arranged awkwardly near the barn, and always those footprints that seemed to wander nearer every dawn. He brushed it off as wildlife, coyotes, maybe, or sheep from distant herds, until the morning he woke to find Micah gone. Panic clutched Elias like ice in his chest. He ran from the house, shouting his son's name, his voice cracking with fear that seemed far too big for a man who once thought himself unbreakable. He found Micah at the edge of the brush, kneeling beside something small and dark. Elias ran to him, every second stretched like a scream, only to find Micah gently cradling a bundle of worn blankets, inside which lay a woman, or at least, he thought a woman, her face hidden beneath shadows and dust. Her breathing was faint, yet persistent, as if her very spirit refused to surrender to the merciless desert. Elias knelt beside his son, heart pounding with awe and fear in equal measure. The woman's hair was black as the night before a storm, her skin kissed by years of sun and hardship, and when her eyes finally opened, they held a depth that seemed older than time itself, eyes that whispered of history, endurance, pain, and courage. She did not speak, but when she reached out a trembling hand toward Micah, her look carried a story that Elias knew, somehow, was about to change their lives forever. No one in Red Mesa could have prepared him for what came next, what these 2 women would tell them, and how their arrival on this forgotten land would turn a simple dream of a fresh start into a journey of identity, belonging, and redemption, a journey etched deeply in both the sands of the desert and the human heart. Subscribe to be part of this journey. we're building something incredible together. The first pale glow of dawn, Elias woke to the sound of voices, voices he hadn't heard in weeks. The desert outside was silent at sunrise, but inside his old farmhouse, there was something stirring, something alive and human. He blinked, disoriented, and then remembered, the woman, and the other one, lying on the blankets beside Micah. He stepped cautiously into the main room, his heart pounding like a thunderous drum, wondering what awaited him, not fully aware that this morning would unravel truths buried deep beneath years of dust, silence, and fear. The two women lay on worn quilts at the center of the room, one with eyes still closed, breathing slow and heavy, the other already awake and watching Elias with an intensity that made the air crackle. She sat upright, wrapped in faded cloth that hinted at survival, not surrender. Her face was striking, sharp, strong, and full of stories she had yet to tell, stories etched into the lines around her eyes and the set of her shoulders. Elias swallowed hard, uncertain if it was bravery or foolishness that urged him forward, but before he could speak, the woman's voice, husky, cautious, and resonant like wind over stone, filled the room. "You bought this land," she said simply, as though stating the obvious. Elias nodded slowly, unsure if her words were a question or a declaration. "Yes," he replied, "I bought it so I could start over with my son." Micah, sensing tension, clutched his father's hand but said nothing. The woman continued to watch them, her amber eyes sharp and curious, yet something warmer flickered beneath her gaze, something that hinted at trust yet to be earned. After a long silence, she finally spoke again, "We didn't come by choice." Elias felt a jolt run through him, not of fear, but of recognition. The land they now stood on had a history, deeper and darker than he had ever imagined when he bought it. This was Apache territory, land that had witnessed centuries of conflict, resilience, and survival. The Apache people were legendary, warriors and caretakers of the desert, survivors of battles with nature and settlers alike, and here, on his doorstep, were two women whose presence carried a weight beyond reason. For a moment, Elias felt history press upon him, like a physical force. I don't understand," Elias said, his voice trembling. "How did you come to be here?" The woman's gaze softened, a flicker of sorrow and strength intertwined in her expression. She reached out and gently touched Micah's cheek, her fingers warm against his skin. "We were running," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "From things that should have been forgotten. From promises broken. From betrayal." Elias felt something deep stir in his chest, a pull between compassion and caution, but when Micah smiled back at the woman, a simple, forgiving, innocent smile, something inside him clicked. What had begun as fear was now transforming into a responsibility he could not deny. The other woman stirred then, her eyes fluttering open, and when she saw Micah, her face relaxed into something like peace. Together, Elias, Micah, and the two women, whom they would come to know as Ayanna and Naomi, began a fragile exchange of words, stories, and truths. Ayanna spoke of travel and hardship, of losing her home to the ruthless march of time and circumstance, and of carrying memories that weighed heavier than any pack she had ever borne. Naomi, quieter but no less fierce, spoke of loss and longing, longing for family, for belonging, and for a future that seemed always just out of reach. Each of their words resonated with a heartbreaking honesty, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As days turned into weeks, Elias found himself teaching them how to fix the water pump, how to farm the stubborn soil, how to adapt to a world both harsh and beautiful. In return, Ayanna and Naomi taught Elias and Micah how to read the land in ways they had never known, how the wind whispered weather, how the stars guided the night, and how every rock and cactus had a story if you listened long enough. Their lives became entwined, not by fate alone, but by mutual respect, friendship, and the shared courage to heal. Micah learned Apache stories and legends, laughing with Ayanna as she recounted tales of desert spirits and sky warriors. Naomi shared her wisdom of survival, teaching Micah how to find water hidden beneath roots and to appreciate the sacred silence of dawn. Through it all, Elias watched his son grow in confidence, kindness, and wonder, a transformation that stirred something deep within his own heart. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon and the sky flamed with colors like fire and gold, Elias stood on the porch with Micah, hand in hand, watching Ayanna and Naomi move across the yard, gathering herbs and water. The air was calm, and the world seemed whole in its silence. "Dad," Micah said softly, breaking the quiet, "do you think they'll stay with us?" Elias paused, feeling the weight of the moment, the intertwining of two worlds that had once been strangers, now bonded by trust. He looked down at Micah, seeing not a scared boy but a brave young heart illuminated by hope. "I think," Elias said, his voice steady, "that we've already built a family, just not the kind we expected. Love doesn't have only one shape or one story. Sometimes, it grows where you least expect it." And as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the desert floor, something powerful stirred in Elias's soul, a sense of completion and beginning, of endings that lead to rebirth, of stories carried forward by hearts brave enough to hope. Clapperboard, if this story moved you, if you felt the grit, the courage, and the transformation of these characters, then make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because in the next video, we'll explore their deeper histories, the secrets of the land, and the destiny that ties them all together. Right finger subscribe now, and become part of a narrative that celebrates survival, connection, and the human spirit.